Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Celtic Down Under, the weekend review. I'm Anthony Maguire, and this week I'm joined, as always, with Paul Massey as we discuss St Mirren 0, Celtic 2, fifth round of the Scottish Cup. Actually, not a bad game to watch, given the state of the pitch. But before we get into all of that, Paul, how are you, and how was your weekend?
Yeah, weekend was good. Pretty tame. Not a lot socially going on at the minute. I've got busy at work and got a bit of holidays coming up, so the weekends are quite tame. So yeah, got a couple of nice little lunches out with my lovely wife, and then watched the game at a pretty reasonable hour. Probably mention I delayed watching the rugby and watched that on Sunday morning. And the less said about that, well, actually, the less about it. It's worth a discussion on that because I've been banging on about the virtues of how rugby union uses video technology, and they made an absolute pig's ear of it. So there's definitely a discussion point there, but that was the downside of my weekend. Scotland getting robbed in the last minute against France and sort of ruined championship opportunities, but yeah, at least Celtic got the job done, which is the main thing.
Yes, when Mikey Stewart's mentioning commentary, like, you know, the TRO got it completely wrong. I mean, obviously it was a horrendous decision. That was in the commentary during the match last night. Got a wee comment here from Uncle Nobby Steamboat. Howdy troops, how you doing, mate? Good to have you on board. And by all means, if you're listening or watching, as the case may be, please give us a comment, give us your thoughts as we're rolling along this hour. It was really hot in Perth this weekend just gone, so kind of tried to stay inside and do as little as possible, really. And then we sort of went out at night time, so caught another couple of fringe shows, little sort of stand-up comedy gig with two twin brothers, and late night circus act, which was also pretty good. So it was nice to get out. Anyway, enough of that. Monty's having his little chime in early tonight, so usually he saves that for the second half of the show. Paul, we obviously, had a reasonable result, given the fact that, since we've come back from the break, Celtic's not exactly been sort of firing all cylinders. We've been critical of some of the performances, despite getting the results most of the time. Brendan Rodgers has said some very interesting things in his post-match comments, both pitch side with Jim Goodwin and Neil Lennon and Emma Dodds, and then also in other post-match interviews that we will go into as the show goes on. But I guess where we'll start, I suppose, is with the lineup, because we always had a few changes. The main one being a change in formation, which you were in a state of shock. I was bit of a state of shock when the team lines were read out about an hour and a half before kickoff. Celtic going with a 4-4-2 or a 4-4-1-1, or however they spin it any way you like. There's a few different ways of doing it, but basically starting with two recognised centre forwards. So Paul, firstly on that, and then secondly, we had a few changes in personnel. So obviously the return of Kyogo to the starting lineup, who wasn't dropped. Brendan Rodgers very clear to say that post-match, and along with Luis Palma back on the wing, Maeda switching over to the right at the expense of Kuhn. And who was the other one that started?
Welsh came back in.
And Welsh came back in. Sorry, yep. So Welsh came back in for Noroski, and Abada dropped out of the squad altogether. So they were the real main sort of changes there. So
Tomoki on the bench. Tomoki on the bench as well, so obviously didn't get minutes, but yeah, nice to see him back. And obviously the Koreans were back, both Yang and O back in the squad and getting game time. I guess there's lots to talk about in the lineup, as you sort of touched on. There's a fair amount going on, both on the starting lineup and on the bench. We'll start with the lineup. Well, you went with Kyogo. You started with the Kyogo starting alongside Ida, or just behind. Was a bit of a shock, I thought. I don't think it's the biggest shock in the world, but Brendan Rodgers has been pretty rigid in his formation, and didn't necessarily see that coming, although difficult to drop Eid after their penalties, but they're crucial goals. His confidence will be up, so it's difficult to rotate him out, and you kind of want to get Kyogo in. So great to see them both playing. I thought Ida had a kind of he was on the fringes. He was a bit like how Kyogo's sort of suffered in games. He sort of starved of some service and not been heavily involved. And Kyogo playing that little bit deeper was more involved. And I think Rodgers made some comments about, sometimes he was too deep, but when he did find the ball in between the lines, he was effective and caused some problems. And obviously that's where the first goal comes from. So yeah, good to see him back. Goal will fill him with some confidence. I still don't think anyone really knows what the best sort of variation is of the front 4 or 5. I think Bernardo can feel a little bit hard done by to be rotated, albeit that he's a young player and he probably will benefit from that rotation and a bit of rest because he has looked a little bit leggy at times. But I think in recent games Matt O'Reilly's been off the boil a wee bit, and almost Bernardo has been the better of the two of late. But you can't, you need to. I wonder if O'Reilly's performance has been maybe because of that little back spasm twinge thing.
Possibly.
There's a lot being said about, his head's been turned by, the rumoured Atletico bid. But if you look at both goals, the player that celebrates both goals the most is Matt O'Reilly. He's bent over and he's pumping both fists. So I think the support jumps to conclusions and negativity.
No.
Pretty is. And I think a player that's fired as well as he has all season, he's due it. You're entitled to a little dip in form. They're not robots. He's not gonna, and they're playing a lot of matches. So yeah, that's the front section in terms of the changes. We've been really ineffective on both wings. So nobody's really guaranteeing a place there. Palmer's as guilty as any. He'll have a game or two where he'll have assists or goals and he'll look useful, and then he'll have a game where he's pretty dire and almost anonymous. But he took his chance when he came in, so he can be pleased with his performance. But he's another young player. The back line kind of horrified me a little bit and sort of shows you that's where we are. And again, the negative noise on social media says, look how rubbish we are, look how bad we are, all of that. But that's basically a full back 4. In my view, that's a back 4 second choices at least, if not more. So, Johnston, for me, CCV. I still think Narowski ultimately is CCV partner in terms of the next best quality centre back at the club. I'll come on to that in a second. And obviously we're missing Greg Taylor. And I'm sure we'll dedicate some time to the wonder that is Bernabeu in a bit. But it's a backline that doesn't necessarily fill you with confidence. So the fact we came away with a clean sheet and a win is a positive. But the chopping and changing at centre back really sort of has confused me. Nawrocki seems to have done very little wrong, and then he's back on the bench again. And Rodgers did make comments that. And one of the comments he made I thought was interesting was, while centre back is two players, it's one position, and you need that to function as a unit.
I thought that was a very interesting comment as well. That was one that
I thought it was a really interesting comment. But then, and I get that there's been injuries, and maybe Nawrocki's picked up a little knock, and we don't know that information. And as I've said before, the information on injuries out of the club is much more sort of shrouded in secrecy under Brendan Rodgers than it ever was under Ange. You got time frames with Ange. He's got a knock, he's got an injury. It's 6 weeks, it's 2 weeks, it's all of that. Like, you get nothing with Brendan Rodgers. In fact, in that same pitch side discussion, Jim Goodwin asked on injury timelines, and he it's a politician's answer. He talked about how Greg Taylor is on his way back and he's on the pitch, and CCV's a bit longer, but he didn't really give clear timelines on any of them.
He did say Greg Taylor would be available.
He said Greg Taylor should be available next week. That's as much as he said. And he said that Greg Taylor has been missed, and I don't think any Celtic fan would disagree with that. And that tells you a little bit about our strength and depth.
It's like we need the bat signal, but like with a GT on there, like, Greg, come back. We're sorry. We've been criticising you for the better part of half a season, but we need you now.
And then the bench, and you're right. You know, it's the elephant in the room. Obviously, Abada being left out of the squad, and Rodgers is on record as saying, like, you know he's going through a bit, so he was better to have some time out. I've got a lot of I feel like I'm in a bit of a minority here, but I've got a lot of sympathy for Abada's position. There's a lot of people jump to conclusions on his mindset and his view, and that he doesn't want to be here, etc., etc. I think that's simplifying it beyond belief, to be honest. He signed a contract and he knew that the fan base had a sort of sympathy to the Palestinian sort of position, and he was still happy to sign a contract. Now, I imagine he's coming under a vast amount of pressure from people in his homeland that are misinformed. Yeah, either misinformed or getting negative press, etc., etc. I read something that potentially he's separated from his girlfriend, so that it's an extra thing, and another thing in there.
He got back with her.
So yeah, I've not been following that, but at the end of the day, he's 21, 22. That kind of stuff, will affect you. But the pressure, the outside influence pressure on how he's feeling, he can't do right for doing wrong. Like he's sort of trying to keep out of the limelight and get down the tunnel, and obviously Celtic fans saying he's not got his heart's not in it. He's not showing any interest to you, blah blah blah. So, and I'm on record and have been since we started doing these that I think Abada is a phenomenal talent with a really high ceiling. He obviously come back off an injury. He's not been back up to speed. Then he's dealing with all this other personal baggage. Unfortunately, I kind of tend to lean on the way that he probably will leave the club in the summer. But I think it's a huge shame if that ends up being the case, because he's been a great addition when he's been fit for those couple of seasons under Ange, and I've no doubt that given the right circumstances, he could push on again. But I do feel like he's one where a chunk of the vocal fan base, at least, have made a decision, and that might be reasonably hard to come back from. So disappointing, but I know he's got the manager's support, so you never know. Hopefully he can get his fitness and his head right and contribute before the season's done. But yeah, that was the kind of obvious one. The others, just more of the bench rotation. The kids were Vat and Kelly on there, but not used. Tomoki, good to see him back. Obviously, he's carried a knock, so I think he will be a useful squad addition. And obviously, Owen Yang got minutes, and I thought they did okay. Kuhn got some time and not that much to contribute, but he needs minutes. He's clearly not, he's clearly not match fit. So yeah, the more minutes these boys get, the better. Yeah, that's probably enough from me on lineups at least.
I'll just run through some of the stats. So, because this was actually a little bit of an outlier for a normal Celtic game when we're not playing the blue team from Glasgow. So possession 55% to Celtic to 45%. So that was a good, probably 15% lower than where it normally sits. It's normally around about 70% most of the time. Corner kicks, we were 11-4 down. So that's an unusual statistic, because usually we're the ones with a million corners. So I kind of felt that first half, it was just never ending, which I'll touch on in a second. Shots on target 5-3 in our favour. Fouls, believe it or not, 8-7 in St Mirren's favour. That's the first time for everything. And 2 yellow cards to us, which again we'll touch on those a wee bit later when we talk about the referee. And 3 saves apiece, apparently, according to my stats. Anyway, I've got a comment here from Mickey Moynihan saying the makeshift back four did okay, in my honest opinion. Welsh gives his all. I'd make that a back five, because I thought Joe Hart was absolutely immense on the weekend. He's come back and put in some really solid performances for Celtic, even though we haven't been playing terribly well. He's done his part. He's made the saves where they've needed to be made, and there was a couple of cracking saves, particularly in the first half. Drogic, of all people, with an absolute world of a bicycle kick, and Joe Hart equal to the challenge. And not only the first save, but then the presence of mind to swat the ball away again. He must have punched 6 or 7 corners, I can recall. Solid clearances, help him take the pressure off. A makeshift centre half pairing of Stales and Welsh. Stales and Welsh, a lot of good low blocks. Really didn't give the opportunity for the opposition to get a shot off, which is usually what happens to us when we're trying to shoot. Welsh at one point even flying out of the post to get his head on one. So quite fearless. And I think, touch on Bernabe in a second, but with Ralston and Bernabe, I kind of feel that as a unit, they did the jobs. Defensively, they didn't really put too much of a foot wrong. I can remember one instance where Welsh jumped into the back of the guy and gave away a stupid free kick, and that nearly became our undoing. I think that was a corner that led to the one that hits the post. That's right, it's the bar. But for the most part, I kind of felt that yes, on paper it gives you the fear, and you're thinking, oh God, these are second choice players or backup players, but I kind of feel credit where it's due. I kind of felt that we actually defended really, really valiantly. And games are going to be tough. And when the pitch is the way it is, quite fearless the way they were passing the ball back at the back. I don't think I would have been quite as gutsy to sit there and try and ping, 10-yard passes across the side of the pitch sort of thing, with the way the ball was bobbling sort of thing. But we got away with it most of the time. But I just guess that, you're thinking if Brendan Rodgers had CCV available and, Miroski had a bit of a time portal and had a better preseason and didn't get injured or whatever, it would be interesting to know where we'd be at this point in time. And one of the interesting things that Rodgers did say was that CCV is just having recurring niggles from his surgery, which is not the greatest of news. Like, it's obviously flaring up, and then it requires rest to settle down again. And this has been a bit of an on and off pattern pretty much all the season. So he puts it down to maybe not getting a proper preseason, but kind of hoping that it's something that can be rectified. Hopefully we get to see him before the end of the season, but definitely in the off season, hopefully it does get rectified. Paul, I guess with Bernabe, he reminds me of a player I used to play with. There's a guy called Jerome. Lovely kid. He was just a little Mauritian guy. He was like lightning. He was just all instinct. You couldn't know what he was going to do with the ball. He didn't know what he was going to do with the ball. He, 1 minute would take on 3 players and whip it across, and you're thinking, oh my God, that was amazing. And the next minute, he would just take the ball at the park. And you're thinking, how can you just 1 minute be red hot, the next minute be stinking and uncoachable? You couldn't teach him. That was just the way he was, and you just had to accept that you get the good with the bad. And I mean, to some extent, you can maybe throw Maid into this a wee bit as well, but I'm not ready to tar him and Bernabe with the same brush here. But I just kind of feel Bernabe is one of those players. I think he's getting a little bit better just from the fact that he's getting a run of games, and that will help because he's a young player. He was one of the youngest players on the park at 23. And he's at the second lowest appearance count of all the players in the starting lineup on Sunday. But is he going to be someone that can be molded and developed and turned into an actual positional player? I'm not so sure. I just don't think he's got that in his locker. I just think he'll just instinctively do what he does. And if it comes off, it's brilliant. And if it doesn't, he's going to look pretty average. And again, it's just this hot, cold, Jekyll Hyde, take whatever expression you want. But I just feel that, it's a head scratcher. And I think it's trying to take a very gifted, skilled coach that's trying to be able to turn him into a player. It's not like to say he's not got the raw talent, but I just think he's just one of these guys where he's instinctive. And I just don't know if that fits a Rodgers system. What were your thoughts on defence, Paul? And what's your thoughts on Wee Berner?
So I tend to agree with you for the most part on the defense. All the basic defending stuff that you need to do: defend your box, get your blocks in, be brave, put a shift in. You're right. All of that's decent, and the clean sheet reflects that. You're absolutely right to pick out Joe Hart. He was the difference, really. We were under siege for chunks of that first half. Lucky to go in 1-up. And I think, whilst I think you're right in terms of we defended the box pretty well, and there's a lot to be said for how that was done, I feel like we brought upon a lot of the pressure we brought upon ourselves you're right, the pitch was poor, but the pitch is poor for both teams. The defense takes too many chances. The distribution is too poor. Now, Welsh's distribution is better than Scales's, but only because he's looking for forward passes a bit more, and needs fewer touches to get the ball under control and move it on. I feel like a broken record because there's still there's a group of fans that won't hear a bad word said against Scales. But again, I'll reiterate it, just because he's punched above his expectations doesn't mean he's good enough to play for Celtic long term. He's plugged the gap, he's filled a hole, but that should definitely not be our level. He's a solid backup, he's proved that. But he needs 2 to 3 touches every single time he gets the ball. That slows us down. His distribution is sketchy. Sometimes he just has complete aberration and just gives it away. There was twice in around about the 72nd, 73rd minute, twice within a minute, he gave the ball away under relatively no pressure. So it invites pressure onto us. And yes, once, he rectifies mistakes and he throws his body in and stuff like that. But I've just got a higher expectation in terms of what I want from our centre halves. It's one of the reasons I'm surprised that Nawrocki keeps getting sort of in and then back out, because he's the one centre back while CCV's out that will step out with it. He looks confident in possession and will play a vertical pass through the lines. And Rodgers, again, in his both pre and post match, he mentioned when we pass the ball forward and quickly, that's what he's looking for, and that's when things happen. And that's probably a pretty good segue into the goal. Actually, no. I was going to segue in the goal, but I'll come back to. I'll move off of that and speak about Bernabeu. But like that's my issue with the centre backs is, yes, they can defend their box, and that there's definitely a place for that. And when you're in games where you come under pressure, and look where we go, Ibrox, that might be that's a good chance that could be a league deciding kind of match. We will need to be able to defend our box and put our bodies in the line. And that's fine if we're being put under the cosh, but when we're the ones contributing to that, it's not an ideal position. You look great because you've defended it, but you caused that in the first place, sort of thing. On Bernabeu, I agree with you. I don't think he's coachable. I think he's not a left back. We've talked about that. I don't know where his natural position is. I don't think he knows. I think he turned up on the right wing at one point. He often finds himself almost in the 6-yard box. Like in microcosm, you saw everything about him when he won the ball in our left back position. He charged up the byline. He took on 3 or 4. He slalomed past them. He looked like he was going to go all the way, and then he just passed it to no one. And the whole thing broke down, and he's completely out of position. And that just sort of sums him up. His decision making is erratic. His plays erratic. I think temperamentally, he's a bit.
He jumped into
suspect.
that tackle in the second half, which in another day, I mean,
well, he did. And look, I think it's a yellow because he doesn't really make contact, and his feet are flat as opposed to raised. But
it wasn't a headlock just before that, though. But
and that's the point, right? That's the point. If you can make a debate about red, yellow on that because of the jumping and the 2-footed nature and all of that. But ultimately, if the referee does his job, it's a free kick. It's the most, or the linesman, either of them. But they're both looking right at it. He gets a headlock round the head, and then he gets his pull back in the body, and neither of those he gets given as a foul. And there's 2 fouls in there. But yeah, that reaction shows you that he's it's a bit of a stereotype that South Americans can be hot-headed, but he definitely showed a bit of a reaction there. He is getting a little bit better, but like it's a low bar. So I, for one, and I don't think I'm alone in the support, will be delighted to see Greg Taylor back. Brendan Rodgers said that he's the kind of player you don't really realize how much he contributes until he's not there. And I think that's fair. Now, I'm not saying that Greg Taylor is just to the same degree that, Scales is an honest trier and all that. Taylor's a bit the same. I expect us to have a better quality left back, well, before now. But Taylor is you can never accuse Taylor of not putting in a shift and putting his all in. And he does actually contribute more than people realize. He's not great defensively.
I
but
think Greg Taylor is a
he's
leader on the park, though. Like, he is somebody that other players will look to, and he can sort of at least put a tackle in and try and G the team up a bit.
Well, he's also a leader in the dressing room. He's the prankster. He's the joker. Every team needs that. That brings dressing room together, and so is that enough for him to be a left back, a permanent left back? No, he isn't. No, it isn't. But he's certainly a big personality in and around the squad. And again, Brendan Rodgers said he missed his. I can't remember what he called it. It wasn't his physicality, but what he meant was his running power and his ability to run off the ball. And to be fair to Bernabei, he made a really good decoy run for the second goal, which just pulled I think maybe Marcus Fraser pulled one of the defenders just that little bit further away from Lewis Palmer. There was two squaring him up. Bernabei makes the run, that takes one away. This opens up the space and he makes the cross. So I don't want to slate Bernabei, but defensively, he's still very erratic. He's erratic on the ball as well, and his temperament is questionable. And he's not unable. He's not an able deputy, I wouldn't say, but he's done a job.
It's what we've got at the moment. So, I'm just going to jump into some comments just on Bernabei because we're splitting the viewers at the moment. So Mahesh, good to have you on board, buddy. So Bernabei, excellent. He saved Celtic the midfield. Celtic were getting outnumbered left, right, and centre. Michael Ross, he's saying we need to cut our losses with Bernabei. And then Mickey Moyne here, he's saying that, to turn it into a positive, the fact we're having to adapt and deal with teams having to go surely means that we'll shore up our defence. With Ange Ball, we were rarely tested at the back. And then Mickey Moyne on Bernabei's tackle, he was saying, never a blue card, lol. Don't get us started on that, Mickey.
No, not today, please.
No, we'll save that for the other Celtic Down Under podcast. But needless to say, Paul and I are very much aligned with Ange Postecoglou's view on the blue card situation. So if you want to know what that is, go have we watch his press conference, and that will sum up pretty well for everybody. So, Paul, let's turn our attention probably to the first goal because we were 1-0 up after 15 minutes. We broke up a St Mirren attack. Ball breaks to Callum McGregor. He looks up, plays a exquisite forward raking pass to Lewis Palmer on the left wing, who takes 4 touches, gliding up the wing, and then manages to pick out Kyogo, who's running from deep. Times his run perfectly, hits it first time, and takes a wee fortuitous wee glance through Charles Dunn's legs. Sure, and he's the keeper and glides out the back of the net, 1-0. Football can be very simple sometimes when you just play to your strengths. And Cal Mack, I thought Cal Mack actually had a really good game. He was actually finding pockets of space. And I was talking to my brother about it today. And sometimes when you have 3 in the centre midfield, as he was the centre midfielder, my brother, he says sometimes you get a bit lazy because there's 3 of you. And you kind of, this is obviously more of a not quite a professional level, but just because there's 2 other guys in there with you, sometimes you coast through a game a wee bit. Whereas when there's only the 2 of you, obviously Matt O'Reilly and Cal Mack, you've really got to be showing for everything. You've got to be involved in as much as possible. And I just kind of feel that maybe there wasn't as much clutter around Cal Mack as well. It just had a little more space. But there was certain times we picked the ball up and it seemed to all open up for him. And it just, when he gets on the ball, we just look so much more dangerous. And his range of passing's there if he gets the time to play it. And that was a textbook example of a quick break. And we actually took our chances for a change. But it was a wonderful goal. And this is Kyogo playing a bit deeper, but I'm all for it. If he's shooting, he's willing to have a shot at a couple of opportunities, and he has a dig. But the thing is, he's coming onto the ball at the right time. The defender hasn't had a chance to shut him down. The defenders are drawn towards Ida, thinking the ball was ready to go in the box. He's the threat. He's the target man. He's drawing the centre halves, and then Kyogo comes into the gap. It actually worked quite well. I mean, if you're sort of thinking how the game would play out and how it was set up, you think Rodgers would be thinking, well, that's kind of what I want to happen. This is the plan. Do you think it went to plan? Give us your thoughts.
Well, you're right. It's a great goal. Carmack's pass is class. I thought he had a good game without being spectacular. I thought a couple of times he got caught in possession a bit too easily.
I think the pitch got him a wee bit sometimes. There was one that there's definitely one I can remember in the second half. He got sort of bogged down, he was looking for a foul. Didn't get one.
He got sort of hunted in packs a couple of times. Bobbled, so his distribution didn't look as good as usual, but you're right, at times he found pockets of space. I just like to see my midfielder, especially my deep line midfielders, on the half turn. Matt O'Reilly's pretty good at it. Carl can be good at it, but and Holmes got the ability to do it as well. But if you can get on the half turn you're receiving the ball, you're already got a head up and you're on your way to looking for that next pass. And he did it great. He's offered a lot of space. The box was kind of loaded, and therefore there was a fair amount of space, once it broke. It's a brilliant pass. Palmer doesn't have to break stride. He's on his bike and he's away. And unlike the other night against Hibs, where our wingers barely hit a man all night in terms of picking out, especially from like the wide positions, looking for cutbacks or square passes. They were just disconnects. They were missing their men every single time. But Kyogo doesn't have to break stride. Palmer's found him perfectly. And then I think he's aimed where he's aimed between the legs. I think he's definitely planned that. It does take a tiny little neck. I think it's more that it's quite close to Zach Hemmings. I think he's just completely unsighted. And because he's taken it so early, he's not had time to set himself, and he just catches him out. So make sure of Kyogo hitting it really early and being unsighted and probably the little deflect between those three things, he hasn't a chance. He barely moves. He doesn't even really dive. It's sort of past him before he realizes. I think I don't think we created an abundance of chances from where, because of, the on-target shots, but even the off-target shots, there weren't a ton. We created chances on the break. Like that's a goal on the break.
Yeah.
The second goal is sort of a bit of a break as well.
But I guess
we carved out an amazing chance for.
I suppose when the possession's that even, though, it kind of is going to be end to end, so it kind of is almost going to be a bit basketball-like, where you are going to have your turn and break, and then vice versa. It wasn't quite a usual sort of Celtic game where we're trying to break down our camp defense, because they were having a go, and they were right to have a go, because we, haven't been playing well, getting results without playing well. They're at home. The pitch is terrible. It's a cup game.
And also, like most teams we come up against, their main weapon is a set piece, and if you're going to use a set piece, you're going to load up, and then there's space, and then you're stretched. So that's fair. The other really good chance was the one that Tony Ralston laid on to Ida, and he got, I think, on his weaker side, and he's on the slide, and he can't direct it on goal. But it's a brilliant run and ball in like that, really whip, dangerous, slow cross. And you just think, maybe if Kyogo's on the end of that, that's maybe another goal, but maybe we're getting greedy. It was good to see them both on the pitch. My bigger concern is still service. And to Mahesh's earlier point, obviously he's given Bernabei some props for being the person that's loading up that midfield, and that is a job that Greg Taylor does and gives us an extra man in there. But if Kyogo is going to play in that formation and be a bit closer, and we're going to therefore give up some midfield support, then we are going to need sort of somebody to step in and add that extra man, because that's when you can get outnumbered, and that's when you can let other teams get on top.
Well, this is what Mesh is saying here. He's a bit concerned that we gave away 30 final third opportunities, which against a better team might cost us. I don't necessarily think Rodgers is going to go this two up front every week, and you'll pick and choose when to deploy it. But you couldn't drop Ida. Like, it'd be a bit harsh to put Ida back on the bench after scoring the winning goals midweek. But also equally, Kyogo's not really done that much wrong, because even Chris Sutton in the newspaper a couple of days ago, he's saying it's not Kyogo's fault. It's the players around him. He's the best player in the team, but where's his service? Like, where's the balls coming from? And I have to admit, I kind of felt that Palmer was at least trying to get the ball whipped across more. It didn't always come off, but he was trying to get to the byline, whip across in. The number of times he did that versus the number of times he cut in was definitely more in favour of trying to cross it. And that to me is a positive sign. And then we need more of that. And I kind of feel that it wasn't really emulated on the right-hand side with Maeda. Maeda had a bit of a mare, a couple of crosses that went rose ed. They're the memorable ones that you remember, but he just sort of, he just, if you can get the service coming from both sides, then all of a sudden you're not having to flog it down one wing every time. But I kind of felt we were probably slightly over-reliant going down that left wing, from my memory anyway. But obviously that's where the 2 goals ultimately came from, because the second goal, again, Palmer with a exquisite pick out, Matt O'Reilly, probably should score, smashes it off the crossbar, and Maeda falls in front of him, and expressionless, puts it away, turns around, and you can just tell he's obviously annoyed the fact that his crossing was off, and he's probably thinking he was actually having a great game, but he's managed to score, and he's probably thinking, how many times have I had a good game and missed a chance, or and this time I'm not playing that particularly well, and I bagged one, and he's just and he's only 26. I thought, I'd have thought he'd been older. Like obviously he's got that ageless look, obviously, yeah. But yeah, that was an interesting thing that I came across today.
Yeah, no, it's a tidy finish. It's not, it does come straight to him, but it's on the bounce. It's coming at him quite quickly. Just instinctive, one touch and it's in. You'd say, yeah, that's easy, but we've seen players we would judge to be technically more proficient than.
Did you see that boy in the A-League during the weekend?
Yes, I did.
That's probably one of the worst misses of all time. Yeah. I mean, that's got to be up there. If you haven't seen that, just Google Sydney FC, wasn't it? I think it was.
Sydney and Central Coast Mariners, I think. Yes. The guy's called Wood, somebody Wood. Can't remember his first name.
If you want to laugh, Google that. I know we shouldn't laugh at people, but
it's a shocker.
It's terrible.
But again, he's done that thing where he's on the left-hand side of the goal. Just knock it in with your side foot, your left foot, and he tries to get round it with his right and drags it. It's really poor. But yeah, like look at the Burnaby one the other week. He's 12 yards out. He just needs to get his foot over it, and it's an open goal, and he manages to put it over the bar. And I don't think many people would disagree that you would say not Burnaby, Bernardo. Bernardo's a more technically gifted player than Diaz Mera. So whilst it looks straightforward, you still need to stick him away, and it was a good finish. And that probably, that really lifted the kind of pressure, because, and it was nice to see us sort of do it. It's because what we've seen of late is early goal or early pressure, and either get the goal and then not follow it through, or make a mess of the pressure and not score the goal and then ultimately come unraveled and have to scramble later. It was nice to see us get the early goal, settle it down, ride out the tough spell, and then obviously Rodgers got him in and read them a bit of the riot act, because some of his pre and post-match commentary, I almost feel like he's given them the message. They know the message when they go out. They deliver on that for a bit. It gets a result, and then they sort of forget, or just get back into something less direct or quick, and they get slow and ploddy. Because let's be honest, I don't think that Rodgers is telling them to go out and retain the ball in a horseshoe at the expense of everything else. I just don't think that's the message. I think he's probably saying, let's not waste possession and look after the ball. But clearly, he mentions his quick passing through the lines, getting in back. He mentions that quite a lot when we, in pre and post match. So there's something going on. There's a disconnect between what he's asking for and what happens at set points. So it was good that we came out of the traps quite quickly.
Our forward players also benefit from getting the ball early. Like Kyogo needs the ball delivered early. So does Maeda. You need space to run into. But if everyone just huddles up with the ball and then all the space is gone, then all of a sudden, like they're trying to, you try to pick a needle in a haystack. It just doesn't work. Like Ange brought players in based on that quick shift of pattern of play, and for whatever reason, it's just not quite clicked. But when it does click, it's still there. Like you can still see it. I mean, the first goal is case in point. The second goal is case in point. When the ball is moved quickly and you've got teams on the backtrack, then all of a sudden it's a different game. Like they have to defend running back towards their goals. It just changes the whole dynamic. And yes, I think there's a little bit more of that this week because obviously they were having a go and they weren't camped in. But I still feel that transition just needs to be quicker and take a chance. All right, you lose possession. All right, what wins you a game? Is it 70% possession or is it 2 goals in the back of the net? I mean, I actually enjoyed watching that game last night. I mean, it wasn't the prettiest all the time, but I think given the fact the way the pitch was, I kind of felt two teams having a red hot go at it. It was entertaining. I mean, you're sort of sitting there going, Celtic going to be able to weather the storm, all these corners, all this pressure. And obviously they did in the end. But it was still a good. I thought it was a reasonable as a footballing spectacle. It was a good game to watch. I enjoyed it. It was interesting with some of the comments. Jim Goodwin sort of in the post match. We may as well sort of segue into that. He's sort of saying he acknowledged that Brendan Rodgers hasn't really had the opportunity to pick his strongest 11 at any point through the season, and I'd say that's a fair point. Obviously mentioned the injuries. Neil Lennon saying to Brendan, Brendan Rodgers saying it's a high bar set at Celtic, and then Neil Lennon 11, it's your fault, Brendan. And Brendan then goes, it's your fault as well, Neil. And so it was unusual because normally it's, Hun media or whatever, but it was actually you're unusual to see Celtic to have 11 there. Interesting that he keeps running this narrative that, everyone thinks that we're a fractured dressing room and everyone's against, we're not together. He said that a couple of times. And I don't think I haven't seen anywhere in the media that's been labelled at Celtic. All I see is that the performances haven't been there. Well, all right. And then Neil Lennon is very quick to point out you've won 8 of your last 9 games and you've drawn 1. So, I mean, where's the crisis? But I guess, you're kind of taking supporters as a bit of mugs because, yes, ultimately the result is the most important thing. But if you're playing absolutely turgid, horrible football at the same time, and some of it has been pretty turgid, then, is that entertaining fans? Ultimately, football's an entertainment business. I mean, at the end of it, you want your team to win, but you want them to win with a bit of style, a bit of panache. I kind of felt that was a little bit a bit cheeky, I suppose, in one way. He obviously talked about Abada, which we've touched on. He was very clear to point out that Palmer and Kyogo weren't dropped in the Hibs game, from the Hibs game. And then he was also just talking about Kyogo learning to play that role. And I thought that was interesting as well. And he's saying sometimes you drop too deep. And I think you mentioned that as well, Paul. But he really doubled down on that narrative that, there's outside elements trying to unsettle the dressing room. He's sort of saying, well, it's up to us to prove it to ourselves and prove it to our supporters that, we're mentally tough and resilient. I found that quite interesting. It's almost like a bit of a backs to the wall type mentality when, I don't know, unless there's media there that I haven't seen that sort of saying that. And then the other narrative is that, we've got a relatively young squad, and the team that was out against St Mirren on the weekend, if you take Joe Hart and Callum McGregor out of it, then it's a fairly young team. So I actually run the numbers on that just as an exercise. So with them in the team, the average age is bang on 26. And then you take them out, it drops down to 24.6666 recurring. So Kyogo being 29, being the next oldest, and then Maida at 26, and then everyone else is 25 or younger. Paul, was there any comments that Brendan Rodgers made that we haven't already talked about that you sort of found interesting, or any of the narratives or any of the dialogues? I really enjoyed having two coaches interview another coach. I think that format actually works really well. I find it quite interesting.
You can see the mutual respect.
But they're insightful questions, like the questions you would.
Well, yeah, and exactly. And you can see the questions he wants to ask, and he can answer. He can sort of go, well, you guys know, and he's talking about injuries and all those other bits and bobs. There was a follow-up question when he sort of talked about that. He was making kind of reference to. He didn't use the phrase bunker mentality, but that seemed to be what he was suggesting that they were employing. And he was asked, but is that a positive? Can you use that as a positive? And he neglected to take him up on that, and he sort of swiveled away from saying, well, yeah, we're going to hold it's us against the world sort of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting one because he's sort of, and Rodgers is a bit like this, isn't he? He sort of, I don't know if he knows what he's going to say half the time. Do you know what I mean? I don't like. I think again, it's easy to compare because it's the most recent. But I feel like Ange always knew where he was going, always knew what he was going to say to the press. He had an answer for everything, and I think Rodgers is a bit more emotional potentially, and sort of creates bits and pieces of narrative, like you say, to kind of suit as he goes. The thing about questioning their mentality, I wouldn't be surprised if that has had in pockets. I'm sure he's not listening to idiots like me, but I've said, I said that when we missed 2 penalties, we see our heads went down and we fell apart for a bit. And if I'm saying that, I can't believe I'm the only one in any kind of media that's saying that. So maybe he's picked up on pockets of stuff like that that's going around. But I do think we were mentally fragile in that game. But he makes some valid points. We haven't had, I don't think we've brought our strongest team out once this season, between injuries and the Asian Cup and various other bits and pieces. People go, he's got pretty much the same squad. He hasn't, and he made that point again. Between injuries and players gone, and we all know about the lack of ready-made replacements. He's dealing with a weaker squad. He's got a weaker squad than Ange had, and even with that weaker squad, he hasn't had them all available, and particularly strongest players available. Now, I'm not saying that I feel like he could have set them up better, so that's on him to some degree. But it's absolutely valid to say that he hasn't had the strongest squad to work with, and he's been working with. So Lennon is right to, and obviously he's looking after, his managers union. He's looking after Rodgers there, but he's right to say, 8 out of 9, and the other one's a draw. It's the best record in Scotland, right? It's the best record in Scotland. The next closest is Rangers, 8 wins and a loss because we beat them. So, and I get it. Look, it's easy to say, and you're right. It's an entertainment business, but in the professional game, it's an entertainment business for the people that watch it. We absolutely want to see a good performance, but in the interim, we'll take a result. So it's a results business first and foremost, and it certainly is for coaches and ultimately players. If we win a double this season, and we grind it out, and I hope to God we see some lifted performance as players come back, and I think we will. But if we don't, and we just grind our way through the next 13 odd games, 14, 15 games, including Cup, and we win a double, we'll be pretty satisfied with that. Is it the best way to win a double? Absolutely not. Do you want to achieve that? Absolutely. And then we will hope for another false. We hope we don't get another false dawn in the summer, and something actually happens properly around recruitment, and we can build a squad. So, all the cliches of the Cup, you're in the next round, clean sheet and a win, and you get out of there. I think it was that was a definite banana skin. I think it was the toughest tie of the round.
It was the only 2 Premiership teams playing each other, so yeah, it was the toughest tie of the round. I
think we've actually gone to now the easiest draw in the next round. So, I'll take that. Hello, Monty. I'll take that swap. So, yeah, we're on the fumes of the squad at the minute, and hopefully as players come back, there's a bit more competition for places. We start to click into gear a bit, and performances lift. The next couple of games are massive. Kilmarnock and Hearts? Is that?
We've got 2 home games now, I think. Yep. So that's what I think Stephen Welsh said that in his post-match, saying looking forward to a couple of games at home. So it's just weird this season how we've had clusters of away games and then clusters of home games. Like, it's just, I don't understand how it's not. I understand it was a cup game on the weekend, but it just seems like we seem to get these clusters of fixtures where it's bizarre. As you think it'd be home away, but obviously not. We'll just run through a few comments.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify that. Yeah, Kilmarnock this weekend at home, then Motherwell away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We probably neglected to mention the refereeing, but Palmer having a wee dive, unlikely to feature on the reel. Nice to have you on board, Richard.
The refereeing was
The
brutal, absolutely brutal, and not everything you expect from Dickinson. To be honest, just dreadful, absolutely dreadful.
Bacchus, how many challenges does he get away with? I mean, he's a serial pest. Doesn't get booked. I mean, obviously the one for Bernabe before he gets his yellow card. I mean, again, I don't know how neither official saw that. There was a couple of deflected shots by Celtic that should have been corners, and they were given as goal kicks. I just like,
well, yeah, the Yang one is pretty obvious, and then there's a second, the earlier Yang one on the touchline where the St Mirren player just kicks it out at the last minute, and he like gives a goal kick. And while we're touching on Yang, I thought he looked lively when he came on. He was direct. Clearly had a bit of confidence from his time in the Asian Cup. I think there is a player there. I just probably think there was too much asked of him early on. I think this season should really have been about getting him a little bit of pockets of time, and maybe see where he ends up kicking on next season. But I think there's enough there to say that there's potentially a player. Decision making for me is his thing.
Just he sees his head up. Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, it looks like there's a player there. Yeah, I think the refereeing is just poor all round. Like we barely got a thing off him all day. But one little thing, whilst we're talking about decision making, there's one just weird scenario, and I think somebody commented this earlier. Like we would take free kicks inside our half and knock them 1 and 2 yards to players on that crappy surface, 1 or 2 yards, who then have to go back again or sideways again. Just get the ball. Like there was one right on the halfway line, just inside our half and the halfway line. McGregor knocks it 1 yard to Bernabe. He's then taking 2 or 3 touches, doesn't know what to do with it. And then he turns and spins and back to Scales, and then we get put pressure under. And I think and there was a lot of times we put Hart under undue pressure. Like if you've not got the confidence to find a man, don't cop out and roll it back to the keeper on an awful surface. You can punt it up the pitch or hit it down the touchline. You're an actual footballer. He's a goalkeeper, right? Your passing and clearing should be better than the keeper.
Ralston rolled one back right in front of the goal, and I went, "Oh, it's to go anywhere
between the posts." Exactly. Only take a little bobble, and it's it's an own goal. So yeah, that gave me the fear. But Joe Hart was absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it's interesting, like it's literally coincided with a few, Celtic analysis type individuals on Twitter and other social media having a right pop at him, basically saying, he could cost us the league, or he could be the defining factor in the league. Well, he might be, because he's keeping us in games and he's keeping us in competitions.
Well,
that was not the narrative that was being driven.
If he gets injured, that will definitely cost us the league. That much is for sure. He needs to stay fit the rest of the season. I hope I haven't just jinxed him now, but he's
we know that's a risk, and that was without getting into the whole window again. Even a backup goalkeeper that's better than Scott Bain was a big miss, because I've said it before, I'll say it again. Bain gives me the fear. He's good to have around the dressing room. Once again, that's not really good enough as a backup keeper. But yeah, Hart absolutely needs to stay fit. And if he does, I've got no doubt that he won't let us down over the course of the rest of this season.
Is there anything else, Paul, that you wanted to touch on before we move to our man of the match and our reviews and recommendations and all that jazz?
Only one last thing just around the wingers, and you touched on this earlier, and I meant to say it at the time, and sort of as usual we went off on another tangent. But your point about Palmer getting to the byline and looking across, you're right. He did try and do that a bit more often. My issue with that is if you're going to encourage wingers to do that, get them on the right wings. Like he's trying to put cross balls. He's going to try to get to the byline and knock it in with his left foot. He hasn't got a left foot. You've got Kuhn coming on the other side. He's got a wonderful left foot by all accounts. He's running around on the right hand side. Like,
Maeda's playing on the right, and he's left-footed as well, wasn't he? So, same deal.
I'm not sure about which one of his feet are better, to be honest. It's hard to tell.
It depends
But
what boots on what foot, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I did see a comment on Twitter today which made me laugh, which was, why is it some of the time Maeda looks like, like exactly that. He hasn't got his boots on the right foot, across his flying, and then if you look at that goal that he set up, like when they were all dreaming at Hampden, and he set up that goal for Jota, he scoots in, he wins the ball, he swivels on a sixpence and pops it perfectly on his head without, maybe if he thinks about it too long or even starts to think about it, it just goes pear-shaped. But yeah, it's he is a bit of he is an enigma,
I did see a Super Bowl reference today saying that if 3 ads every time Maeda tries to cross the ball or something like that, that was quite amusing. So obviously it's a reference to the Super Bowl. There's ads every like 10 seconds. All right, that's all I'm going to say about the Super Bowl. I don't know who won, and Taylor Swift was there, and that's pretty much it.
Kansas City Chiefs won in overtime. Only the second time in the history of the Super Bowl that it's gone into overtime. So
there you go. Thanks, Paul.
Despite me telling you before we came on here, I've had a very busy few weeks at work. We did take a few, 10, 15 minutes out to watch the last of the Super Bowl final about lunchtime today. So
big business versus small business. But anyway, we won't go there. What was I
Man of the match?
No, there was one more thing I was ready to say. Connor Goldson, the luckiest man in Scotland, I reckon.
Lucky.
VAR just deciding to have a wee sleepy Pete when he decided to have a lunging challenge against the United boy. How that was not a red card, I do not know, but obviously Connor plays by a different set of rules. If he's not playing basketball, he's nearly breaking someone's leg. But we'll leave that one there. And Bruni getting a yellow card and just bemused by the whole thing. But yes, anyway, but we'll leave that one there. Yes, let's write the man of the match, Paul. I think I know what you're going to say, and I think I know what I'm going to say, but I'll let you go first.
2 weeks in a row, Big Joe Hart.
I second that. Yeah, Big Joe. I just didn't put a foot wrong, and like I said, and another day that goes one each with that bicycle kick, and then that changes the complexion of that game entirely. But thankfully we got the second goal and made it relatively comfortable for ourselves, like I said, despite the possession or the lack thereof. Paul, music recommendations, what have we got for us?
Music recommendation of the week is a new band that I have stumbled upon in the last week. So depending on where people are listening to, some people might be across this before I am, but I think they're still pretty new. No album yet. I think only couple of singles, 2 or 3 singles. 5-piece from Cork in Ireland, obviously. They're called the Cliffords. Female vocalist, really good sort of alternative guitar-based band. The single that's just recently out is called Sleeping with Ghosts. There's 2 or 3 other tracks on Spotify or whatever your streaming service is. So yeah, check out the Cliffords. I'm sure there will be more singles and EPs and eventually an album in due course. But yeah, there's a few songs on there worth a look. That's my recommendation of the week. The Cliffords.
I really don't have anything this week. I'm sort of trying to finish off like The Walking Dead, because I sort of let that go ages ago, and then when I get very sort of stressed at work, and I kind of watch that because like it's watching a show people having far more depressing situations than what I'm having, so it kind of makes you feel a bit better. It makes me feel better anyway. So I'm sort of season 10 of The Walking Dead. It was probably released like 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, I'm just trying to get that finished just for completion's sake. So the OCD bit in me just can say, well, I've watched all that, but yes, nothing much else happening at the moment.
No movies that you've overdue from watching?
No, I just didn't get a chance this weekend, so I need to really try and double down and have an effort at it this week. But it's actually quite hard to actually access some of these movies because they're not actually on any streaming services because they're so old or they're sort of a little bit art housey. They just don't tend to have a distributor, so like no one's picked them up. So it's kind of that's my challenge.
Check out YouTube. Because I watched Dead Man's Shoes on YouTube recently. Okay. So sometimes they just somebody uploads the whole movie, maybe even the original distributor. I don't know. Like I've no idea. But have you seen that Dead Man's Shoes?
I haven't. No.
It's an early Shane Meadows, Paddy Considine movie.
Oh, okay.
It's worth a look. It's real low budget. But yeah, if you've watched any Shane Meadows stuff, you kind of got an idea of sort of where his stuff kind of goes. Really gritty but real down to earth and sort of worth a look. And Paddy Considine's absolutely brilliant in it. It's a real small cast, but he's brilliant. Very sinister.
I'll add it to my very long list. Maesh agrees with us. Thanks, Maesh. Thanks for our comments, mate. You're always in there, giving us your opinions. Very much appreciated. I think that we've ticked over an hour, so we've fulfilled our obligations. So I think we'll be back next Monday, raring to go again. Hopefully with another 3 points back in the league, and hopefully still top of the league. I think that's all that's left to say is hail, hail.
Hail, hail.